Music. Music Industry Insights.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to AIM Industry Insights. We welcome our live audience. This is the point where you cheer. And thank you for that. We welcome people who are watching the live stream. We also welcome people who are watching this later on video or podcast. We cover all the formats here. Before we begin, we acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia. We pay our respect to their elders past, present and emerging. Tonight we're coming to you live from Gadigal land. Our guest tonight is one of the most influential media personalities in the industry. She's the managing editor of The Brag Media, a stable of titles that includes Rolling Stone magazine, Variety, The Brag and more. She's got so much to talk about and this is going to be a really fun chat. Please welcome Poppy Reid.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Can you follow me around and do that do that intro every time? That was lovely.
Yeah.
Every time I meet someone, just jump in.
I'll just come and do that intro for you before you walk into any room. So, as you would know, because you've watched all the previous interviews in this series, we always begin by asking our guests how they got their start in the music industry.
Well, I mean, I've always been a music fan. And so when I went to university to study journalism, I knew that I wanted to be a music journalist. I should preface this by saying that I can not read music, I cannot write music, I cannot sing. I was telling you before that my husband gets really angry when I start singing because it's so bad, but I love it. And so I love to write about it. And when I went to uni, I did a Bachelor of Journalism at Griffith Uni on the Gold Coast. And all of my assignments were essentially about music. I would just kind of turn them into these just music industry essays and interviews and stuff like that. And then I finished uni and I just thought that the dream job would come to me on the Gold Coast. And unfortunately it didn't have the music industry that it has there now. It's got even like the Gold Coast Music Awards and it's got this real hub and kind of life there for the music industry there now, but it didn't have that back then. And so I was on, do you remember Faster Louder?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so Faster Louder, before it was the juggernaut that is Junkie now, it had this forum and it had jobs and it had internships available, and I saw that there was one for a company called the Music Network, which had a magazine and a website, and I went for it and I emailed, her name's Bianca O'Neill, she was the digital editor at the time, who I have since been able to bring on as a Rolling Stone magazine freelance writer, which is great. And I basically said to her, I'm living on the Gold Coast. I want to move to Sydney for this internship where I work for free. She was just like, okay, sure, like you do you. And I remember arriving in Sydney and I had nowhere to live. I didn't have a paying job and I had no friends. And I managed to sort all that stuff out within the first couple of weeks. And I remember my first day at the internship and I'd gone to Myer and bought like the most corporate outfit that I could get for this new internship because I was a businesswoman now. And I think it was like, you know, one of those really, you know, high neck shift dresses, and I wore tights underneath, and I think I had black ballet flats that I'd bought especially for the job. And then I walk into the Music Network's office in Glebe. This is when they were in like an old church, and everyone's in jeans and a music t-shirt. And I thought, well, that's the last time I'm pretending to be anyone else but myself. Great, I've found my people. But it took a little while to really kind of find my niche there because I was an intern, and you know, it takes a little while for people to even recognize you and say hello to you in the morning because they see many interns come in and out. But I worked for free for about 6 months. They had like a part-time paying thing as well where I did data entry for this thing they called the Black Book, like a music industry directory. And then I worked my way up to, I think I was editorial assistant and then associate editor and then editor eventually, and I held that job for almost 7 years. Yeah.
So for those that don't know, the Music Network is a music industry magazine. It talks about stuff that's happening in the industry. I think it's always fascinating to me when people talk about their internship experience or their start. just how long they have to persevere without anyone giving you any money at all. And it seems, when you think about it, kind of unfair, I guess, by one reckoning, but you got your start in the business.
Oh, I absolutely loved it. There was not one moment where I was like, you know, I'm not learning something, I'm not, you know, moving forward and moving up. You have to play the long game as well. You know, you kind of have to understand that internships, you're there to learn, and you might be learning data entry for the first 2 months, but also it's the relationships that you get as well. And unfortunately, the music industry is very relationship-based. It's very much who you know in certain situations, unfortunately, and internships are the best way to kind of go in and get to know people. We're in a situation now at the Bragg Media where, unfortunately, we can't hire interns unless they are studying, and the internship essentially adds to that studying. They have to do it as part of their studies, which AIM, of course, offers.
Yes, well,
it's very cool.
Luckily, AIM has exactly that rule. So you know, perhaps your next intern will be an AIM student.
I would love that. Yeah, we need.
There, you heard it here first, people. So we're jumping ahead here. So let's just stick with the early days for a minute. What attracted you to music journalism?
I'm very passionate about telling people stories, and kind of, I think it's a very beautiful, privileged thing to be able to kind of connect fans with an artist's music even more so than they're able to do with the avenues that they have. So, I mean, artists have, you know, their album and their show, and now their social media is a huge way to connect with fans. But I think that journalists really are able to provide this context that maybe the artists themselves aren't able to offer. And I mean, I just don't think there's anyone more fascinating to me than a musician. I think it may be because I don't write or play or sing. I just find them such incredible people. I mean, you know, the fact that music can make you cry over just an arrangement with no lyrics at all just blows my mind. It can make me want to dance, and it also, like, when I was young, especially when I was in my emo phase, listening to a lot of Fall Out Boy and Paramore, it made me feel really seen and not alone. And yeah, so it was kind of this connection that I had to music, and the way it helped me through my own self-esteem issues, all of that stuff. Just, yeah, it's a very beautiful thing that an artist does.
It is, and I think if you look at certainly the history of music, the role of the music journalist as the person that helps to explain what the artist is trying to do is a really interesting role. And one that is, you know, I think has been there all along. And for those that don't know, I used to be a music journalist myself, so this is something I'm quite passionate about. But the idea that, because you often get to hear the music before everybody else does, and you have this rather privileged role of saying, here's what you're about to hear, or here's how you should listen to this, or here's something that you might find interesting about what you're about to hear. So you're helping to contextualise it and explain it, and I think it's certainly a privilege, but it's also very exciting when you get to translate someone's work into what becomes a successful record.
Oh, totally. I mean, I interviewed All Day last week, I think it was, and I got to listen to his record that is not out until May, so that just feels really exciting. And you know, when we do reviews for the magazine and everything, it's a bit of a funny story, but I've written reviews just based on my opinion before, and not had them published, but like done my fact-checking thing. And this is why I freaking love publicists. To all the publicists here tonight, thank you so much for being you, because I'll reach out to the publicist and say, hey, you know, was that what they were talking about, or was this lyric here? You know, when you haven't talked to the artist and you're doing a review, a publicist is so important. And I did one where I didn't have an album bio or anything, and I just kind of thought, okay, this is what I think he's talking about. And then they came back and they're like, no, that is not even close. So the role of the publicist is really important. But you're right, it's an absolute privilege to be able to listen to something first. And to say to All Day, Tom Gaynor, last week, I listened to the record and I really freaking love it. And for him to say, you're actually the first journalist to listen to it, so thank you. You could kind of sense that he was a bit nervous, and he felt really validated that a music critic listened to it and really enjoyed it.
So obviously you went on from Music Network to work more broadly in music journalism and Rolling Stone and all of these amazing titles. I think a lot of people sitting here today would be fascinated to know, how do you get picked to earn a review in Rolling Stone or one of those other titles? Because there's obviously a huge amount of music being released every month or every week. You can't possibly review it all. You wouldn't even begin to try. So what's your process? How do you just decide what's worth reviewing? And you might even give it a bad review after you've reviewed it, but how do you even decide what's worth reviewing?
So with Rolling Stone magazine, we don't have much space for reviews. So we have a remit that it has to be 99% Australian or New Zealand reviews. And I think it's about 13 reviews all up. And so myself and Tyler just write them, to be completely honest. Tyler's the editor of Rolling Stone. He actually started as an intern before I was brought into the fold with Tone Deaf, and then worked his way up to news editor, and now he's Rolling Stone editor. He's the most brilliant person ever. Follow him on social media, Tyler Jenke. I think he's the Jenke on Twitter, because he's a true music fan. He makes cassette mixtapes, and he's that kind of fan. Yeah, but no, it is a really when we go to choose album reviews, it's, are they Australian and do we like them? Because I personally refuse to publish an album review that I don't like. I think that music is very, very subjective, and if I don't like it, my question to myself is this even for you? You know, was the record made for you, or is it perhaps another fan base? And this is just me. I personally don't think that it is right to slam a record anymore, because I think that there are other fans out there that would love it. Unless you are a huge fan of that artist and they missed the mark, and you've reviewed them before, and you know it's 5 records in and they just really didn't hit it. But even then, personally, I would be not wanting to really review it. I'm not a huge fan of blasting Australian artists, artists in general, but especially Aussie artists. Not a huge fan of that.
Yeah, it's an interesting power you have, because, as you say, it is entirely subjective. Someone might love that record, and you wield a lot of power, you know, especially when you have a famous masthead like Rolling Stone, because if Rolling Stone says it's a terrible record, a lot of people are going to say, well, apparently it's a terrible record, and they won't even listen to it. So you've kind of effectively screwed up that artist's chances of having a successful album.
Absolutely, and I think there was a review published years ago by a publication which I won't name, which talked about how bad the first Gang of You's album was, and how they would never really do anything. And look at them now, motherfucker. Sorry.
It's okay, you're allowed
You can bleep that out.
You're allowed to swear.
Oh, good, okay. I can be myself then,
Yeah.
good.
I said it was like live TV. I didn't say it was live TV. So let's talk about, you know, the whole thing around music magazines, because, you know, obviously I grew up in an era where everything was a physical magazine, a printed magazine, and you'd wait for it to arrive at the newsagent. And there's something great and tactile about buying a magazine or one of those sort of papers like the NME where you've got black ink all over your fingers. We're now living in a very digital age, and I know, you know, for example, Rolling Stone is largely digital, but you have print copies, print editions as well. What's your take on all of that? Do you still think there's a role for print?
God, it's so funny. When we first entered the licensing deal to operate Rolling Stone in Australia and New Zealand, we went over to America, and we went there. It was a very privileged trip. Luke and I, my boss, our CEO, went to New York, and we went to the PMC, which is Penske Media Corporation, which owns Rolling Stone. We went to their office on 5th Avenue in Manhattan, and it was snowing. Like, it was just a dream. And we went there with the idea that we would not do a print magazine, because we were thinking, you know, print is running out the door. Like, it's a dying industry. And we met with every single, a representative from every single sector in that business. So we met with like their head of video and their head of social media and their print editor and their online editor and all the stuff. And it made me just so jealous of the resources and the teams that they have there. But we also met with, you know, head of marketing, head of commercial, all of that. And I think it was 35% of their overall revenue comes from funds earned through the magazine. And so we thought, fuck it, let's do it.
And yeah, it's interesting because now I think as a journalist, I mean, 20 years ago, a print journalist was just that. You did an interview, you wrote an article, they ran a photo, and that was that. Nowadays, you're expected to be curating a social media feed, you're expected to do video often. The role of the journalist has changed quite dramatically. And I don't know, I guess it continues to change.
It's changed so much. I mean, journalists are so much more visible as well, just like, you know, kind of piggybacking off what you were saying. Yes, a journalist's role is so much more than writing an article, filing it, and then moving on to the next one. There's all of that, you know, I guess I could call it aftercare. Like, you've got to push it out on social media and make sure it's getting into the right groups and, you know, the right communities are seeing it as well. But journalists are turning into almost influencers in their own right. They've got their own communities around them. They're building their social media platforms, and publications are coming to them because of that audience and going, well, we've got our audience and we'll tap into yours. A really interesting example of that is Forbes. They have this thing called Journalist Entrepreneurs. They've just launched it. And essentially they are looking for and have about 6 at the moment, writers who have their own paying newsletter databases. So someone who might have, you know, a Medium site where people pay to view their articles or their newsletter, or a Patreon or something like that. And they are absorbing those subscribers to that newsletter within Forbes, and they're paying the writer a salary. And they're paying them a 50% split for every new subscriber that they bring on, paying subscriber. And they're also paying them for traffic revenue. Once the writer achieves a certain page view point, they will receive revenue for every click that they get after that. It's a genius. Like, this is something that we are actually looking to emulate here because it's so great. So there's that side of it where writers are, you know, really having their own currency in their own right, becoming entrepreneurs, which I love. But this visibility that journalists have, for me, is quite worrying as well, because we're seeing a lot of trolling for journalists on social media. And there was this writer, she's a freelance writer, a couple of years ago from Canada, and she was tweeting about Nicki Minaj's album at the time. And she said something along the lines of, I just wish that she would make more mature music, I'm using air quotes, and I'm using air quotes again, no silly songs is what she said. And she got absolutely targeted by Nicki Minaj's fans, who were essentially weaponized, like mobilized and weaponized. It was crazy. This young journalist, she had a 4-year-old daughter at the time. That 4-year-old daughter's photo was plastered all over the internet. A lot of people were saying things to her, and trigger warning for this, you should kill yourself. It was really, really awful. So it makes me really question how much music journalists nowadays can truly critique something when we're seeing these fan bases be mobilized to attack.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Because where I was going to go with, because it seems like there's two conflicting trends. On the one hand, you've got this democratization of media. So in a sense, we are all capable of being critics. You know, if I've got my own Twitter feed or whatever, I can express my views on what I like, and my followers, if I have any, can kind of take my advice. I can do a Spotify playlist. I can curate if I want to. Any of us can. But then, so there's that trend, which is happening globally, and then the other trend is the age-old trend of the idea of the tastemaker, the person who really does have better taste than everybody else, and really does know, you know, the Richard Kingsmills of this world, the people who really actually kind of know more and have better taste, and they become people that we should all maybe follow because they're cool and they just seem to know stuff. And it seems like those two things are kind of crashing into each other, and you don't obviously have to follow a particular person if you don't like their taste. But I still think there's a role for that person who's just just got great ears.
Absolutely, and that's who I'm looking for when I'm looking for writers to bring on in a freelance or staff capacity. Someone that can offer our readers context for everything, that doesn't have to, stay up late for hours researching one artist because they're going to do an interview with them the next day. That just kind of like can know this stuff, has lived this stuff, has been a music fan and a music critic, through this stuff. And it doesn't mean that that person has to be, an older person because they've, lived through it. It just means that they're just such an obsessive music fan that they're able to offer those fans really huge context is, the main thing that I think these tastemakers offer.
Yeah, and I think, a few years ago, if Rolling Stone had published a list of the top 100 Australian albums, as you did recently, was it 100?
50 Australian
50.
artists,
Okay.
yeah.
So if you had done that a few years ago, I suspect everyone would have gone, oh, fair enough, that's the 50, that's the list. Now, everyone can mobilise and have an opinion.
Oh,
and,
the
and,
hate that we got. It was awesome. I was like, yes, keep the discussion going. Great. Give us the clicks. Yeah, it was funny. Someone got the magazine before we'd put anything online, took down all of the names and all of the rankings and everything and put it onto a couple of discussion groups. And, my sister actually, she designs the magazine. And she was like, oh, that's such a bummer. Like, maybe they won't go out and get it, or maybe they won't wait till it's online. And I'm like, no, this is like the best branding campaign ever. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So you think that the world will still need tastemakers?
Absolutely.
But I think, I just want to come back. Okay, I mean, with Rolling Stone, you only run a limited number of reviews, but I do think, particularly for our students or our alumni, this idea of how do you get heard is a really big issue. How, if you're making music, and we learned the other day, 60,000 tracks get uploaded onto Spotify every week, some crazy number, and people are releasing albums at what seems to be a rate of knots. There seem to be so many artists, more than there used to be. How does anyone get heard? How does anyone get noticed? How do you get pushed up to that ranking where you're considered to be worthy of everyone's attention?
Obviously I can only answer this from a lens of media and how they can get noticed by media, particularly our company, the Bragg Media. I was telling you before how I get lots of emails. I think I get like 100 emails every hour. But a lot of them are press releases as well. So, the biggest thing, and I'll be completely honest, the biggest thing that I rely on is publicists giving me context for these releases as well. If you are an artist and you're reaching out to media and you have the budget to get a publicist, just do that, absolutely. They have personal relationships, they know exactly what is being published on each publication, so they can really give a curated approach to when they pitch to media. But if you're just you and you don't have that luxury, then you really need to, again, take a curated approach. You can't just email every single music journalist or every single media company and do the whole spray and pray approach. It just doesn't work anymore. If you're reaching out to, say, Tone Deaf, if you were an emerging band, you would know from looking at our website that we have something called the Get to Know feature, which is very simple for us to put together. It's a Q&A. We fire out the Q&As. They come back written. We add a little bit of an intro, do our SEO thing to make sure it ranks in Google, push it out on social media. It doesn't take us very long. And so you might say, I would love to pitch myself for a get to know. Here's a bit of info about me. I don't know if you cover here, how to pitch yourself and send a press release and keep it brief, not too much. But also understand each publication. You wouldn't go to a metal publication and pitch your electronic duo act or whatever. So it's definitely about doing your homework. Yeah.
But there's no trick. There's no simple way to get under that wall.
We're also looking at communities and where I think, fans are tastemakers in their own right. So we're also looking at artists that are doing something different, building their own communities, doing fun, different things. I think, TikTok is breaking so many artists. You do not need a label or a publicist to launch a TikTok account and get massive. So I guess building your own community is a really good route.
So, changing the subject to the topic of how women fare in the music industry is been kicking around for quite some time now, and with good reason. And obviously the music industry is not the only industry where this is a topic at the moment. So I'd like to talk to you about that, but if I may, it feels to me that there's two separate issues that we should be talking about. One is the glass ceiling issue, which is access to opportunities in the industry, and whether women get equal opportunity to get those senior positions. And then there's an entirely separate issue, possibly related, which is misogyny and sexism and assault and abuse and all of those things. And I think they're potentially two quite different things, although no doubt they're related to one another. But interested to get you, I mean, do you agree that they're separate, or do you think they're all related?
I think it's all related. I think one perpetuates the other. Yeah, it's a really tricky one, but it's also not tricky whatsoever. This industry has a massive problem with abuse of power, absolutely. And you look at the Harvey Weinstein Me Too movement that happened 2016, 2017, and you just think of him as this monster, like he's just this awful, awful being. Unfortunately, there are Harvey Weinsteins in every single industry, and these women are scared, so scared to come forward. They're so scared to tell their stories. They're so scared to tell media. And in Australia, the biggest issue and the reason why they don't tell media is our defamation laws. Our defamation laws protect abusers right now. I was told by our lawyer this week, our in-house lawyer, he's a bit of a badass, Michael from Mark Lawyers. He told me that the defamation laws are looking to change, maybe at the end of the year, that New South Wales is on board. We just need the rest of the country, all of the states to be on board. And it will change to really help media be able to name these perpetrators. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to that.
I heard something really interesting today, which is that I was talking to Dean from APRA AMCOS, and he said that of all the songwriters registered in Australia that they've got on through APRA AMCOS, which is thousands and thousands of songwriters, only 20% are women.
And it's been that way for a while, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that flows right through. If you take that as a kind of a reasonable litmus test of how many women are sort of operating in the industry, and arguably there's more writers than maybe there are in other sectors, but it's way underrepresented.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I did find something else interesting today, which is because once I learnt that statistic, I thought I'd like to know what percentage of women are studying at AIM.
Ooh.
Almost 50%.
That's fantastic. So what happens after?
So I guess, well, I'm an optimist, so I'm thinking the future is looking a lot better than the present.
Has it always been 50%, or is that a recent stat?
I don't know. I didn't find that out.
Yeah, because that would be interesting, because I wonder if there is an issue with women studying music, and then after their studies they go into an entry-level position and something happens, and they get pushed out of the industry because of an experience. That's a lot of things that I have heard in my circles, is that there are incredible women just being pushed out of the industry entirely because of issues related to sexism, misogyny, assault. So it's really, really unfortunate. And I think one of the things that we need to see is men need to do two things. One, recognise their privilege. Just because they're a man, they have an insane amount of privilege in this industry, and just a recognition of that would be a great start. And two, open the door, create space. If you are taking job applications and you don't have a 50-50 split, or it just doesn't feel quite even, leave that job open for a little longer, or go out and find more women to apply. I do believe in a meritocracy, absolutely, but I do believe that creating space is going to be the way up, and kind of leaving this space open for these women to come and take these leadership roles. I think that's the only way that we're going to see true change, is if more women have leadership roles. And I think the women that I know that are leaders in this industry have a very beautiful way of working, which I think is needed across the entire industry. I think it's not even really a gender thing, it's just a feminine energy in a managerial role. When it comes to these women, a couple of things that I notice about them is that they're very transparent and very empathetic, and I think that that is so needed in this industry. There's nothing that I think Gen Zers especially that I've worked with, there's nothing they want more than empathy and understanding of their situation and who they are, and transparency. You know, where do they sit in the company? Where are they going? What's your vision for them? Or asking them what their vision is for your company as well.
Do you think a young woman listening to that might be discouraged from joining the music industry, or should they be discouraged?
It's a really tough question, because I came into this music industry entirely ignorant and didn't know all of the things that happen in this industry. The longer you're in it, the more friends you make, the more people tell you of their experiences. I would not want any woman to not come in this industry. We need you. Like, please, you know, pursue a career in music, because we definitely need non-males, more non-males in this industry. But yes, it is harrowing, it is scary. You will probably be, based on experiences that I have talked about with other women, you will probably be subjected to misogyny and sexism. You have to be strong.
Do you think it's changing? I mean, it seems the subject certainly appears to be, it's now being addressed and it's now out in the open, and there's some very interesting conversations going on in terms of people sharing their stories. And you know, there was an article the other day in the mainstream media saying, you know, the industry's full of these kind of misogynist monsters. So it's kind of out there now, and people are going, oh my God, is it that bad? I mean, I had no idea. So it's certainly sparking a lot of interesting conversations, even amongst people who don't work in the industry. So it seems like we're kind of at a moment where change might occur. And there also seems to be a generation of younger managers and younger executives who are aware of it and want to play a part in changing it. So are you optimistic about it?
Absolutely, you've got to be. There's no other way to be than optimistic. And, you know, one of the things that I've noticed from these women that are coming forward and these women that are using their voice is that they are so damn strong, like so brave, so courageous. And if I was in their situation and I was that age, I don't think I would have that strength. I really don't. It's pretty freaking incredible. But I mean, I have a question for you though. Like, because yes, we're seeing it more. I think voices are getting louder. Platforms are being used that perhaps we didn't have in the past. But did you notice sexism and misogyny when you were coming up in the industry? Was it around you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was about to say I asked the questions, but then I thought, no, I won't do that.
You said it was a conversation.
Well, we're both ex-journalists. Well, you're still a journalist. I'm an ex-journalist. You're allowed to ask questions. It was an incredibly male industry. You know, in the 70s and 80s, the Australian music industry was overwhelmingly male. For some weird reason, there's always been women in publicity and promo. That seemed to be always the area where women were allowed to be in the industry. But, you know, by and large, in executive roles, not so much. Yes, I mean, absolutely, I think you observed it, but I think you're always going to observe it when it's almost entirely run by men. And the rules are set by men, and they get to employ people that, you know, they're friends and guys that they like to go to the footy with or whatever. So it sort of perpetuates over time. And I think a lot has changed. I look around now and I see, firstly, what's interesting is a lot more female artists who are songwriters and creators. They're not just a singer, they're kind of, you know, the full package. And a lot more women executives today than there were even 10 years ago. So it's definitely changing, but when you look at the percentages of women on, you know, boards and in executive roles in major record labels, for example, clearly there's still a long way to go. If we're, you know, it's nowhere near 50-50, it's not even, I wouldn't think 30-70, so.
Yeah, we're chipping away at it, bit by bit.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think there is a different energy that comes with that. Because, you know, if you've got a boardroom of men sitting around discussing what records they're going to release or what the marketing plan is going to look like.
Or who their tour manager should be, or who their booking agent should be.
It was going to be a pretty dull conversation, but they're going to miss a lot too, because they're sort of just going to confirm their own biases the whole time.
Yeah, and they're going to choose their friends, and this whole idea of the boys' club kind of just keeps on going. And that's where men need to step in and be like, you know what, this is a bit of a sausage fest right now, guys. Let's bring in some women in. Like, this is a conversation that is suddenly all men. You know, let's get a female perspective, or a non-male perspective, I should say.
Yeah. Well, I think these days, if you walk into a boardroom anywhere and there's only men in the room, then you should probably go, there's something wrong with this picture. Why are we doing this? What's going on here?
It doesn't even seem like that long ago that we would go to conferences and on the stage there would be a manel, I like to call them. And now I don't think that happens as much. I think that a lot of conferences are instilling rules where it must be 50-50.
Yeah, good. So another topic that seems to come up a lot at the moment and we're sort of really fascinated by is the issue of mental health in the music industry. The statistics all reveal that musicians and music industry professionals are very much overrepresented in terms of anxiety and depression and other mental health issues. Support Act have got a lot of great research in this. And needless to say, the last year hasn't helped. I mean, you know, certainly for performers, it's been a really tough year. And I think as an industry, we seem to be becoming a lot more aware of it and trying to find solutions to it. But someone in the music media, how do you read all of that?
I think you're right. I think we're becoming more aware of it. The conversations are turning from, I saw this tweet the other day and it was like a year ago. This year has gone very fast. And it was like how it was comparing, you know, eras. And it said, you know, it used to be like, did you know that Susan's in therapy? Oh my God. And then now it's like, oh my God, my therapist told me that I do that. I'm so sorry. You know, it's very open in terms of how we talk about our mental health conditions, and you know, we have names for things, and it's very, you know, it's a very serious conversation now. But one thing I have noticed from interviewing artists is that they seem to all struggle or have mental health conditions. You know, it's very, very open, and this industry, unfortunately, isn't the greatest space for artists when it comes to a mental health condition. Sometimes artists might be on tour and then a tour bus and then a plane and they haven't seen daylight in 3 days. And then some artists are being paid with alcohol, which is just the worst. And, you know, for me personally, I've been, you know, from being in this industry and talking to these artists and talking to staff who have mental health issues, I've really noticed my own, and I've been much more upfront with it. You know, I've been known to call my boss Luke and say, I'm really overwhelmed and I'm feeling crazy anxious and I just need to stop doing this project and go home. And he's been known to give me a massage, oh, that's gross. He's been known to give me a massage voucher. Can we cut out that other bit? He's been known to give me vouchers for massages because he knows that I love them so much, and movie vouchers as well. And he'll be like, just go. Like, here is a double pass to gold class. Take your husband to the movies. Go get a massage after. And that's been really great. But I've also, you know, I've done certain things in my life to try and, you know, help that and keep my own mental health well-being as well. I don't drink anymore. It's actually 4 years since I had my last drink on Friday.
Good for you.
Yeah, thank you. I did it for my mental health and my physical health. And I know it's Friday because the last time I drank was at my wedding, because I didn't drink 2 years prior to my wedding for my health. And then I thought, stuff it, gonna have a drink at my wedding. It'll be fun. And it really was. And so then it's been 4 years. So that's really helped. And you know, I also use writing to get through my mental health issues as well, like not in artist interviews in terms of those write-ups, but in terms of, you know, I did an article on my binge eating disorder, which was really interesting and cathartic to write about, and I had a lot of people reach out to me and say, you know, your article really helped me, and I had the ABC reach out and do a story and interview me for it, and I've done a couple of other things as well where I'm kind of working through mental health things. Right now, a huge focus for me is learning about my own heritage and where I'm from. I'm New Zealand and New Zealand Māori on my dad's side, and so I'm very passionate about learning about that. So I'm doing this article for Rolling Stone about how New Zealand is keeping te reo, which is their native language, alive through music. And I'm interviewing all these artists, and then I'm talking to my auntie and learning about my whakapapa and learning about my great-grandmother, who I didn't even know existed, and she's just this amazing, strong Māori woman. And so that's my way of dealing with a lot of my mental health stuff.
That's great. So one of the things that we learn about musicians in particular with mental health is they're particularly vulnerable for a very obvious and simple reason, which is that as an artist you put your whole self on the line when you write a song or record a song. If your magazine doesn't sell so well this month, you can kind of move past that. It's not your entire soul on the line. But if you write a song and no one likes it or no one plays it on the radio, it can feel like a personal wound. And if that keeps happening to you over a period of time, it's pretty damaging. So I think which goes back to your point about if you're not going to write a nice review, maybe don't write any at all. But
not everyone's like that, unfortunately.
No, yeah. And it's an industry in which artists are very vulnerable and get rejected a lot or ignored, which is almost worse. And and often no one is there to recognise that or say that must have been really hard, having that rejection. You just have to deal with it.
It's a really, and that's why I find musicians so incredible as well. There's this real resilience to an artist because there is a lot of years, sometimes a really long time before people recognise your music. And I mean, for artists, I don't think many of them do it because they want recognition. I think many of them do it like in the way that I write through my health issues because they have to, because it's cathartic to them. And I think as long as artists are writing for those reasons, then they will find solace in their work. However, we do have an issue where artists aren't paid fairly, especially when it comes to streaming, unfortunately. I wish they would raise that just a little bit, give the artists a bit more.
Yeah. And just to wrap up that mental health thing, though, I mean, that's an interesting topic in its own right, but we'll get to that in a sec. But what I think is interesting with the music media is sometimes, and we were saying this before, sometimes people have found the story of an artist unravelling entertaining. An artist who's got a drug problem or is drinking too much or is falling off stages or whatever. We're kind of drawn to that story, or we have been historically, the Kurt Cobain type, it's an ongoing meltdown, but we can't look away. And I think now you look back on some of those stories, and obviously the Britney Spears story is very much in everyone's mind. I think now you look at it and you go, honestly, this person was crying out for help and, needed help, and no one was giving it to them.
Absolutely. The signs were all there. Maybe we didn't have the words or the names to recognise them, but I also think that there are people that knew. And, in Britney's case, interestingly, when Clubhouse launched, do you know what Clubhouse is? It's a new social media platform.
Oh, I must keep up.
I don't know if I love it yet, but it's all, they have rooms, these Clubhouse rooms, and you go in and people are talking about a certain topic. And my boss, he was, invited to use Clubhouse when it kind of first launched, and people were, very un-PC when they were talking about things in this Clubhouse because it just didn't have that conference element of an audience there, and it wasn't being recorded in any way. It was just, this conversation between people. And he entered a room that had a conversation with a former day manager of Britney Spears, and she said that she recognised how bad it was, that she went to her boss and said, we need to get her off this tour. It is so bad. And the boss told her to shut up or he would fire her.
So, yeah, and that sort of stuff happens every day, sadly, or it certainly used to. I'm sure it still does. So you just mentioned, it'd be great if people got paid more for streaming. You meet a hell of a lot of artists in the course of your day or your week. Australian artists, and you probably get a sense of how many of them are doing okay and how many of them aren't, because it's all kind of invisible now. You could be getting pretty good revenue out of your streams and maybe people don't really know that. So is your sense that a lot of people are making good money out of recorded music, or is your sense that very few are? I
think there's a lot of money to be made from recorded music. I I don't know the percentages. It's a tricky one to talk to, actually. I think because there's so many avenues where artists make money now as well, and I think, you know, that kind of idea that the bulk of the money that they make is from, you know, merchandise through touring as well, which we kind of realised when COVID hit, when, you know, their kind of rug was pulled out from under their feet because of it, and they needed help from the government, and, you know, we kind of saw how bad it was. But in saying that, I think that there is a lot of money to be made from streaming. I think that it's a tricky one. It's hard to speak to, actually. I think that what artists are doing more, which I absolutely love, is partnering with brands. You know, there's a lot of brand money. There's a lot of brands that are uncool, that want to look cool, and so they come into the music industry. And I think that it's less... do you remember when artists used to partner with brands and people would say, oh, they've sold out, like how dare they partner with KFC or whatever? Yeah. Now it's like, hell yeah, like that is awesome, get that money. You know, that's kind of how fans are feeling as well, and it's more common, and there's a lot of money out there. We know it because that's largely our business model is big brands. We don't get a huge amount from the music industry, although our partnerships that we do have are freaking awesome, and we would love more of them, but the bulk of what keeps the lights on for us is from brands. Yeah.
So...
Sorry, I feel like I just danced around that. I don't really know.
Well, we know that Tones and I made a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
And that bit we know. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
So, we're almost at the end. And this is the point where I ask our guests to offer some advice. You know, if you had some advice for... And maybe we should do it a bit differently today. Maybe we should actually ask you, if you know, you've got students, alumni watching this, maybe we should ask you, what's your advice for the boys and what's your advice for the girls?
Okay, for the boys, make space, keep making space. Why not have a female or non-male in your band? Why not have more women in your social circles so that you can consult them when you are working through a decision or something like that? And for everyone, not just women or men, your mentor doesn't need to know that they're your mentor. I wrote an op-ed about this recently, and you know, I think it's quite a privileged thing to be able to get into a mentorship program and they team you up with someone in the field that you want to work in, and that's just great. Or you reach out to someone and say, I'd like to pay you to be my mentor. I know that kind of relationship exists, but all of my mentors, and I wish I had known this earlier because I just would have been more structured in the way I was doing it, and I think that a mentor is a very, very important thing to have in your life. All my mentors don't actually know they're my mentors. They, you know, we go to lunch or we go out for a walk, or I have a, you know, work meeting, and, you know, where they're kind of talking to me about things related to my role, but I'm really, you know, kind of gauging their advice on certain things that I'm working through. And of course, it has to be reciprocal. You know, you have to try and give as much as you get, but they don't actually need to know. Just, you know, the music industry is full of very friendly, lovely people, as much as I have talked about misogynists and sexists in the industry. There are so many beautiful people that are willing to help, that are willing to pay it forward because that someone helped them when they were younger and they were just coming up. So don't be afraid to just reach out to that person and see whether you can buy them a coffee or take them to lunch or I was at South by Southwest in America, and this woman said that her way of doing it is like she'll work out. She was from New Zealand, so this industry is a bit smaller than ours, but she would just go to gigs where she knows that person's there and just be like, oh, fancy running into you. Oh my gosh, what do you think of the band? And like, you know, she would have like talking points in her head that they would find interesting, and then, you know, follow up with an email the next day and, you know, would you like to catch up kind of thing, and kind of builds it from there. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. I don't find that creepy. I find that genius. The other thing I would say is to not feel like you are defined by your missteps. I have messed up royally in the past. I have done, you know, major F-ups, and I used to think like, oh God, that's the end of me, my reputation's out the door, rah, rah. And it's not. You know, what you have done is not who you are. And, you know, we have a thing in our office at the moment where we have our weekly meeting, and we nominate one person to talk about a person they're most proud of, and then an ambitious mistake that they made. And ambitious mistakes are really encouraged in our company, and it's so freeing to know that I can just mess something up, but that doesn't define me. And I think that I wish I had have known that earlier. I would have got a lot more sleep and not stressed so much about little things that I'd messed up, because if you're not messing up, then you're not really trying to push the boundaries of what you're doing. And then I guess the last piece of advice I would give is to understand that there's always someone watching. And, for me, I was at the Music Network. Had been there for almost 7 years. And Luke Gerges, our now CEO, he reached out to me and said, can we meet up? And I was like, sure, just another meeting, like whatever. He wants me to write a press release for him. He was working at Shock Records. I was like, okay, sure, whatever. And then he told me that he was going to start a media company and asked whether I had any advice for him. And I thought that was really funny because I didn't know what I was doing. And I thought he was crazy for starting a media company anyway. But I just imparted whatever I knew about my job and how it runs. And then a couple of months later, I saw him at Big Sound, and he said, he's going to do it. He's going to start this media company. I was like, good on you, man. Like, see ya. And then he called me a couple months later and said, I've done it. I've bought Tone Deaf and I've bought The Brag, and will you come over and be my managing editor? That was the phone call. And then he's like, oh, wait, we should probably do an interview. And I was like, yeah, sure. And then I went to his office and we kind of talked some more, and he was like, so you in? And I'm like, yeah, this sounds amazing. So my message there, it's a long way of getting to it, but my message is to understand that someone's always watching. If you are, like you were talking about before, these artists that just feel like they might just be, releasing music for no one, that they haven't found their audience yet, that they're ignored, there is always someone watching. So just keep going.
Do you think you'll always be a music journalist? There's a long tradition in Australia of music journalists going on to do other things. What about you?
I cannot see myself being good at anything else, but I would like to get better at what I'm already doing. I want to be a better writer. I want to be a better journalist. I want to be a better manager. I'm working a lot on, doing a lot of professional development on how to be a better leader. But I want to stay with the Brag Media. I want the Brag Media to grow and be global. And I want, why shouldn't the Brag Media have a London office or a New York office or something like that? And why shouldn't I get to go visit PMC on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan whenever I want?
or like run it.
Or like run it. Whoa, okay. Calm down.
Come on, where's your ambition?
My boss actually said once, I would love for you to take over and be CEO. And he's like, we should work to get you there. And but I don't know if I want to be CEO. I like writing. I love writing.
You'll get that out of your system eventually. This has been a great interview. Please thank Poppy Reid.
Thank you.
Well, last week, oh yeah, photo. Last week they turned